Alright, welcome back to our series of lessons on PowerPoint, and in this video we're going to be going through images and image manipulation. So basically, images are probably the most important thing that you can do with PowerPoint. PowerPoint is not actually for putting up bullet points and text, it's for putting images, right? These are things that people can look at to be engaged with your talk, right? You're assuming that your presentation will coincide with the talk that you're doing. And even if it's not, even if it's meant as an informational display or a kiosk display, the image should always be the focal point of every single slide. The text that gets added is supplementing that image, right? So in terms of managing images, there's a few different ways to get images into a slideshow. The first and the easiest way is to go to Insert, Picture, and you can choose from Online Pictures or this device. Now, Online Pictures is going to open this Bing window, right, powered by Bing, and as you can see, it's broken into categories, or you can just search. So, we can look for some images, and these images are Creative Commons only, and what that means is that they're typically fair use license agreements. So you should be able to enter these images without any question, and it will probably automatically pull a credit. See, there you go. So in this case, unknown author is licensed. However, it's under this Creative Commons license. If you're not familiar with Creative Commons licensing, we're going to have a discussion of that in a later video. But you can check out creativecommons.org to learn more about it. Essentially, it's a series of licenses that allow people to give away their photos and videos with certain conditions. And the conditions are usually something as simple as credit the author and don't, sell it. So that's one way to get it in. Another way is to go to Picture and use pictures from your current device. And so in this case, you would actually pop up with this browser window. And from here, you would be able to explore your photo library or a USB stick or a camera that's plugged in and find any image that you wanted. And so in this case, let's just go look at, let's see. We'll take this monkey picture and we'll click Insert. Now, something to bear in mind is that when you insert an image, it's going to come in as big as it can. And so this image happens to be larger than the size of our document, so it's automatically made it scale to fit inside the constraints of our presentation. Once you have an image in, you can move it around just by clicking and dragging. And if you hold Shift while you move it around, you will lock it onto its current axis. So this is very important because sometimes you might want to keep an image exactly where it is horizontally and move it vertically. Or vice versa, you might want to keep it exactly where it is vertically and move it horizontally. So in those cases, you hold Shift. And what that'll do is that'll make sure that image is staying on its current position. So for example, let's say, I'm just going to go ahead and shrink this down. Now in newer PowerPoint versions, when you resize an image, you don't have to hold anything on the keyboard. It keeps it automatically in its current aspect ratio, which is very useful because that means it won't warp your image. And you'll notice that I get these little red lines that are helping me snap it to the center point here. Right? So once it's snapped now, if I wanted to move this image left, but I wanted to make sure that it stayed in the middle, I would hold Shift and move the image to the left. And you'll notice that red line stays there. I'm locked to this red line. It's impossible for me to go up or down. It's locked on this red line. Or if I do want to go up and down, I can do it, but then it's locked onto this axis. So wherever you start, if you hold Shift, it's going to lock one of the two X or Y axes. And this is very, very useful if you have something aligned to the center of a page and you want to move it left or right, or so on. So this gives you a lot of power to make sure that images are not moving a tiny bit. Because, if you try to move an image just without doing that, it's very easy that you'll accidentally move it off from center, right? So, there's snapped and there it snaps. But if you've got more than one images going on, it could be a little bit more confusing. So holding Shift, you guys can try this on your own. Holding Shift will lock the movement of an image to either left and right or up and down, but not both at the same time. You get one or the other. You can't go at the same time, and this is a very useful trick. All right, some more tricks with manipulating images. So let's put it back in the center here, and I'm just going to use this snapping feature. And now I'm going to change the size. You'll notice that whatever corner you drag, it's going to change the size from that corner. I'm going to Control Z to undo that and show it from this corner, and then I'm going to Control Z and so on. So whichever corner I drag from, it scales in that direction. But what if I want to keep it in the center? Because once I do this, the image is no longer centered. Well, if I hold Control while doing that, it's going to scale the image, but it's going to keep the center point locked. And as you can see, what that means is that my image is still perfectly centered on the page. And so if I bring this to the edge, the bottom should also align perfectly to the edge. And once I let go, it's done. And now it's still perfectly in the center, as you can see. All right? You can do this for shrinking it too. So hold Control and just drag that edge down, and it's still locked in the center. All right, so this is a great way of scaling your images without losing its position. All right, if I do this, it loses its position on the page. So anywhere you are, if you hold Control while scaling an image, it locks the center to its current position. It's a very useful little trick. All right. For images, if you do want to warp the image, there's a way that you can do that, and that is by going to the edges. So the corners will scale the image without changing the aspect ratio. The edges will stretch the image to make it fit. Now, I happen to know that this is a 4:3 image, so that if I stretch it to this 16:9 image, the slide, the image will be stretched. As you can see, it's now no longer its original size. Once you do that, the corners again will keep that same aspect ratio. So just be very careful not to stretch your image if you don't want to. If you'd like to get back to your original aspect ratio, if your picture was from a camera, it's probably going to be in 4:3 aspect ratio. So what you can do for that is you can come up to Format and go to Crop. Select the aspect ratio 4:3, or 3:4, excuse me. No, 4:3 is what we wanted. 4:3, there we go. So this is portrait is the vertical modes and landscape is the landscape mode. So we want 4:3, and we're going to go fill. And there we go. And as you can see, my image is now back to its normal scaling. All right. Let's keep discussing this crop button because there's a lot of stuff that we can do from here. If I wanted this image to take up full screen, to use the full size of this slide, there's a few different ways I could do that, but probably the easiest way is just to put it in one of the two corners and then click on this crop button. And this crop button will open these black bars. And so I'm going to take this black bar in the corner just because it's going to save me time. I don't want to go one and then the other. So I'm going to grab the black bar in the corner. And you'll notice that the black bar is actually changing. So we have 3 different mouse icons as we move our mouse over here. First, we have an angled white arrow. That's actually relating to the size of the image, so the scaling of the actual image. When I get into the corner, I get the same image as that I can see here. So this little black L-shaped icon. And then if I come in, I've got black arrows going in 4 direction. And this actually is the position of the image within the crop. And so we're going to start by we want that black crop marker in the corner. We're going to click and hold on that, and we're going to drag it to the edge of the image. And this is going to basically create a crop that fills up this entire frame. Now, right now, if we were to click away, we would lose, this wouldn't do anything. It would look exactly the same. And so what's happening right now is the image is only showing in this corner of our image because our image, the actual frame of the image, has been changed to be the same size as the full thing. And so whatever the background of your image is, you can set the background color for your image. That is what will appear here. And so sometimes that could be useful because you might want to actually have the background match something that's next to it. But in this case, we want this image to fill up the entire space of the image frame. So I'm going to come up to that crop function again and click it to fill. Now you'll notice I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to zoom out by holding Control on my keyboard and scrolling the mouse wheel backwards. You can also zoom out down here. You'll notice that it's filled the image frame, but there's some image on the top and bottom. And what I can do now is I can adjust the position of the image to decide where I want this crop to function. And so if I was just to click and hold, I might move it in a way that I don't want to move it. So I'm going to use the trick from before. I'm going to hold shift. And by holding shift, I make sure that I can only move this image up and down or side to side, but I can't do both. And in this case, because this image is getting cropped on the top and bottom, I only want to move it up and down. And so in this case, I might want to move it to here so that my little watermark in the bottom left is still showing up. And so wherever you let go, that's where your crop is going to be. And then to finalize it, there's a few things you can do. You can just press enter, escape, or you can just click outside of the image and that will finalize the crop. So now the great thing is that this isn't permanent. If you decide, you know what, that monkey is not at a good angle, you can just come up and click crop again, and the rest of the image is still there outside of the cropped frame. So now I'm going to take it, and again, holding shift, and I'll show you why am I holding shift? Because if I try to bring this down, I might accidentally do something like that. See, I'm bringing it down and to the right, and I don't want that, because then I'm going to get a white bar on the side of my image. Now, because this is full screen, it's pretty easy for me to just snap it to the edge, and it should stay on the edge, but holding shift just guarantees that that image is going to stay exactly on its current axis. So I'm going to bring this down again. I'm holding shift so that it's only moving up and down, and I'm going to bring it to about there, and I'll just click outside, and there we go. That looks quite nice for me. Another useful feature is that with this crop function, you can very easily find the middle of a slide. So I've just clicked on that crop button. I'm grabbing the crop anchor from the side, either side, and I'm just going to drag it, and it's actually just automatically going to snap to the middle of the slide. All right. Now this would give me a perfect 50-50 ratio on this slide, showing an image on one half of the screen. And now I can just use my mouse again in the image, and you can, anywhere you see that symbol with the 4 black arrows on your mouse, you can pick up and drag your image around to position it how you want. And even from here, you can still scale. So I can come up to these anchors and scale that image within the crop, right, to get it to be just the way I like it, right, and move it around, and I can scale it a little bit more. However, if you don't want to worry about all that, you can always just come up here and choose fill or fit. Now, fill is the option that you probably should be using all the time. Fit will leave you with some white bars unless your frame, which is this thing, the frame of your image, perfectly matches the aspect ratio of the original image. Only fill will not leave you with white bars. Fit only works if the frame and the image are exactly the same aspect ratio. And as you can see, we've changed this aspect ratio. It's now almost a square from its original 4:3. All right. So we're going to go to fill. And what that does is that's going to fill this frame up using my image with leaving nothing left over where it can. So in this case, it leaves extra on the left and the right. So now I'm going to hold shift and move it left and the right to get it to where I want it to be. So I might crop out that text so it's just the image. And when I'm done, I just click away, and there we go. I've got a beautiful image. So that's all great. So now we figured out how to get an image into the document. We figured out how to manipulate it a little bit. Let's do a couple more tricks. So let's say I wanted another image over here on the left side. Super easy. Select this, hold Control, and you'll see that my mouse cursor changes to another symbol, which actually is to create a copy. Now, I can click on this image and move it, and when I let go, I'm going to get a second copy of that image. That's great, but I just undid. I'm just going to undo that, what I just did, so I just have one image now. But what I'm actually going to do is not only am I going to hold Control, but I'm also going to hold Shift. And again, I'm going to hold Shift because I want to lock it to its current axis. And now I'm just going to click and move this image over to the left. And simple as that, I have 2 images exactly perfectly filling up the slide, broken in half. And now I can change this image. So this second image, I can change it. I want this to be something else. So I'm going to go right click, change picture, and I'll do from a file. And let's set this to be, I don't know, this bird. And there you go. And so now we have this bird filling up one half of the image. That's a terrible picture. Let's try something else. Change picture from file. Let's go do a more exciting photograph. How about this? Nope, that's blurry. Change picture. Come on, give me a good image. I'm sure I have some good photographs here somewhere. I can try this one. There we go. That's better. Now, sometimes when you put images in, they might not fill up your same crop. So if you find yourself in a situation where you've just put a new image in and it comes in like this, don't worry. This happens sometimes. So right now, your frame is perfect. Your frame is set to half of this slide, but when you change the image, it doesn't come in right. It comes in filling or fitting rather than filling. No problem. You're just going to select it and select fill, and that will set it right back to fill up the whole space. It's super easy. And you can even go bigger if you want, again. So let's make this guy a little bit larger, and we'll put him like so. Boom. Boom. There we go. So that's how easy it is to put images in. If I wanted to add another image, sometimes, to be honest, it's faster for me to just hold control, create a new image, and change the picture here rather than going file insert. You know, my mouse is already there. I don't want to have to click up here all the time. So it's just little tricks to help, you know, speed up your life. Let's go ahead and change. Let's do some other things about aspect ratio. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new slide. And on this one, we will change the aspect ratio of a picture. So here we've got this picture. It's set to exactly half. So if we want to change the aspect ratio of this, let's go to Format, let's go to Crop, and we'll go to Aspect Ratio, and let's set it to 16:9. So as you guys know, 16:9 is widescreen. I'm now going to go to Aspect, I'm going to go to Crop, and I'm going to go to Fill, and then I'm going to adjust with Shift up and down until I get it where I want it. Let's say it's there. And now this image should be perfectly fit to this slide, because we know that our slide is already set to a 16:9 aspect ratio. Okay, let's go ahead, and the reason I'm copying and pasting these slides rather than making a new one is because my slides are completely empty, and if I click a new slide, then I have got these text boxes templates that I have to go in and delete anyways. So for me, it's just easier to just duplicate a slide, so I don't have to waste my time doing that. Right, it's just one little trick to speed up your workflow again. If you want to just work with a blank slide, you may as well just duplicate a slide or copy and paste a slide that you already have. So there's two ways to do it, right? You can just select it and duplicate, or you can select the slide, Control C, Control V. That fast, you get your other slides built in. All right, so we've got this one. Let's go ahead and change the aspect ratio again. Let's go to Format, Aspect Ratio, and now let's go to 1:1. This makes it a square, right? Which is really useful for a lot of situations. So now I've got this perfect square that I can use as a heading with some text next to it, or I can have multiple squares set across my entire document. And again, as you guys see, what I'm doing here is I'm just using the control function to create copies. I see that this one is automatically aligned to the middle, and the distance is perfect from the top two. I'm going to bring this one, yep, the distances are perfect. So everything is matching with the distances, and so now I'm just going to hold control and very easily go across and make some extra images like so. So this would be one way in which you can get a grid of images, but you'll notice I made a mistake. I didn't have enough spacing to have it fit on the full slide. So if you did want to group a bunch of your images on a slide in some sort of grid like this, how would you do it? And how would you do it quickly? Well, I'm going to show you. The first thing you're going to do is figure out how many images you want across the top. So how many did I have there? 5. So I want 5 slides, images across the top. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this image to the right, and I'll hold Shift to keep it locked on that same line. I'm not even going to worry about the spacing right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. So see how the spacing is all over the place? Doesn't matter. It's not what I'm interested in at this stage. So the first thing I'm going to do is select all my images there, and I'm going to distribute them evenly. So I'm going to go to Arrange from the Format tool. It's over here in a line. From the Home tool, it's here in Arrange. It's all the same thing. So they just hide a line inside Arrange when you're on the home screen, and from the Picture tool, it's got its own thing inside a line. So from the Format tool, I'm going to go to Align. Actually, you know what? We'll do it from the Home because that's where most people are going to be. So I'm going to go to Arrange, and I'm going to go to Align, and then within Align, I'm going to distribute horizontally. And so now the spacing between all of these images is perfectly equal. The next thing I need to do is make sure that all of this is centered on the slide. So to do that, I'm going to group them together. And then I'm going to center this whole thing on the slide by aligning it to the center. And as you can see, it didn't move, but it may have moved a little bit. So let's go align, center. And there we go. So now what you know is all of these things are perfectly as a group in the middle of this slide, and the spacing between them all is equal. If you want that spacing to be less, no problem. Here's how you do that. First, ungroup. Then you're just going to say, you know what, these gaps are too big. I don't like that. So no problem. Move one of them in and then repeat the process. So the way it distributes will be based on where you put your first and your last image. So if you decide to put your first and your last image super close together, it will distribute everything between those two images. If you put them further apart, it'll distribute everything between those images. So in this case, let's go ahead and put it here and see what happens. So now we'll go arrange, align, distribute horizontally. That looks a bit better. Now I'm going to group those, and you'll see now it's definitely not in the center anymore. So I will align to the center. All right. You have to do that as a group, because if that's not grouped and you arrange, align, center, they all stack on top of each other, right? That's not what we wanted. So you make sure they're in a group to arrange them and align them to the center. And then I'm actually going to leave them grouped for now to save me some work later, but I'll get back to that in a minute. I'm going to hold Control to make a copy and Shift to keep them on the same axis, and I'm going to drag it down. And you'll notice it snapped to the center there, and I'm going to do that again. And this time I'll get a little warning bar that I'm at the right spacing. So I'll get to the right spacing and boom. Now, I've got 3 groups, but I'm not sure about the vertical spacing here. I'll just mess it up to make it more even more complicated. So I've got 3 vertical groups. Now what I can do is select these 3 groups and do the same process. So I just decide where I want that bottom one to be. I'm holding Shift so it can only go up and down. Let's say I want it to be about there. And now I'm going to select all 3, arrange, align, and this time I'm distributing vertically. So I'm distributing these 3 groups vertically. And so now the spacing vertically between these images are all the same across all of them. And once I've done this, I'm actually going to group all 3 of these groups together and make sure that all of this is perfectly centered and aligned. To me, it looks like this space here is a bit higher than this space, a bit smaller than this space on the bottom. So let's select that super group, align, center, good, already in the center, and align middle. I bet it's going to go down a tiny bit. There we go. So now I have a perfect grid of little monkeys. I can ungroup all of them now. So group, ungroup, and then select again, group, ungroup. And so now each of these can be changed to a different image as I see fit. And I've got my perfectly distributed grid of monkeys. And if I wanted to have, like, for example, text that appears to the left of it, I could just, remove this box and, put a block of text in there, or remove this one and put a block of text in there, or remove this one, put a block of text there. There's all sorts of fun design ideas that you can do with that. The next thing I want to show is something similar to this. So I'm going to duplicate that page again. But now let's see what would we do if we wanted these to have no border, so no edge. So let's say I wanted to have like 3 monkeys, like, taking up this entire side of this screen. So super easy. So first of all, you want to make sure your images are the same size, right? So I've already cropped these to squares, and I've already set them to be just copies of each other, so I know they're the same size. So I'm just going to stack them on top of each other, and I'm going to put them into the top corner, and then I'm going to group them. And I'll show you why I'm going to group them. If I didn't group them, look what happens when I start to scale. They overlap each other. But if I group them, so right-click, group, or on your keyboard, you can press Control-G. They become a single group, and now when I scale them, it starts to stretch. I don't like that. I don't want that. So to keep them from stretching, I'm going to hold Shift. So this only applies to images when they're in groups. When they're by themselves, you don't need to do this. So I'm going to hold Shift to keep them in their aspect ratio, and I'm going to drag it down until it snaps to the bottom. And now I've got perfectly distributed 3 monkeys, and of course you can change these pictures to something else if you want. So, and again, if for some reason the aspect ratio is wrong when you import your new picture, that's not a problem. So I'll demonstrate what that would look like. I think I need a portrait. So these are actually squares. So it probably, with a square, we probably won't see this problem. But let's just simulate it. So you might have your image coming in like this, or it might have white bars on the left and right side. Doesn't matter. Don't worry. Your frame is still square. And so if your frame is square like that, you can just go crop and fill. And if your frame for some reason changes, then that's also not a problem. So let me go to fit here, and then I'm actually going to fit this frame to the picture. So I'm going to actually just take our frame and crop it to the original aspect ratio, which is 4:3. Sometimes this might happen, especially in older versions of PowerPoint. And so when you change a picture, it might actually change the frame. So I've lost my square aspect ratio. The good thing is it's going to remember one of these edges. So in this case, this crop has remembered this left edge, which means all I need to do to recreate the original square is take this edge up. And if I hold Control at the same time, look what happens with the bottom edge. It's moving at the same time in the opposite direction. So once I've done that, it's essentially back to a square again. And you can check that it's a square because you can check up here that it says both length and width are the same. So then I would just come to crop and fill. And if I want to tell it, you know, actually you are in fact a square, I can crop it and set the aspect ratio to 1:1. It won't change anything, but it will keep it locked as a square. All right, and so that's going to summarize what we can do with that. What if we wanted to do it horizontally? We'll just do this real quick as a demo. So again, let's take our images and make them, let's say, aspect ratio. Let's do 16:10 portrait. Oh, we can't do that. All right, we'll do 4:5 portrait. That's fine. So what if we had some images like this? So I'll go crop, fill, so we get our full image there. And now I want to do 3 images across this whole section. All right, no problem. Let's just get the 3 images first. We'll snap them together so that they're nicely lined up. Oops. Control Z when you mess up. Group it. And then, actually, in this case, I can even not worry about the stretching because maybe I'll replace the images later. So let's just go across like this, and let's say we want 3 images roughly like that at the top of the image, at the top of the slide. That's great. Now I can select these, group, ungroup, and now I have 3 perfect image boxes that I can use to replace as my from my picture library. So this makes it very easy, and you'll see when that new image comes in, it doesn't have the weird stretching, right? So I've got a good collection of picture frames that I can use now to very quickly set up a new slide. And I'm just, when I want to adjust the crop, I just select crop, hold shift, and just adjust the angle of that crop. So I'll just go right click, change picture from a file, and let's take something different. So get a frog. There we go. Let's say I want this to be over there. I'm just going to select this, hold shift, move it all the way to the right until it snaps, and then select all of them and move it back to the center. So that way you can easily adjust the order that they're in rather than having to change the pictures around. All right, so that's doing 3 pictures, taking up the horizontal. And if it's 4 pictures, no problem. I mean, same idea, right? So if I wanted this to be 4 columns rather than 3 columns, no problem. I'm just going to take any one of these pictures, hold Control and Shift to keep it locked on the same plane, so it's stuck left and right. I'll put it to the end there, select them all, group them together. Again, you have to group them, and now I'm going to squish them like so, right? They're squished. But by squishing them, I'm going to ungroup, they are now all exactly in quarters. So we've got 4 perfect columns here. And to fix the crop, I can just go ahead and change the crop to fill for all of them, one by one. And that resets the squish, so no more squished frogs. Super easy. So that's how you can go from 3 to 4 or something like that. But the trick is to group them first, stretch it to where you want it to be, ungroup them, and then reset the crop angle. All right, we have a few more picture manipulation things to go through. So let's go through the color editing, and let me, actually, you know what, we'll take this picture because it's pretty boring and gray. So I'm going to go to crop, and we're going to go full screen with this one. So I'm just setting these crop handles into each corner, and then I'll go crop fill. And so now we have, let's take it from there. So we have a bit of, let me get a different picture. I'll find another bad picture to work with. Oh boy. All right, let's check this vulture picture. There we go. So, you don't need Photoshop, you don't need Lightroom to do some very basic photo editing. We have a whole other video on photo editing coming up. However, you can do a lot of the basic stuff directly from PowerPoint. So to edit pictures within PowerPoint, you're going to come over to your picture tool and then format. This is going to pop up only when you select on an image. And then you've got a few different options over here. You've got corrections and color and artistic effects. In general, I'm going to not go through artistic effects because these are pretty rare used cases. I suppose for a cover image or something, maybe. But in general, these artistic effects are not something that I use. However, within color, you have a lot of really powerful options. And the first is the saturation. So you can go full on black and white or super, super vibrant and oversaturated, which I wouldn't recommend doing. But for an image like this, which is a little bit gray, I might want to bump up the saturation a bit. Now, these are presets, and so this one goes from 100% saturation to 200% saturation. I think 200 looks a little bit intense, so maybe like 125% would be nice. If you don't see your options here, that's okay, because you can always select picture color options, and it will pull in this side panel, and this actually has all of these same controls, but in more detail and more fine-tuned control. So here I can increase the saturation by increments of 1, or I can just type in 125. And that to me, maybe let's try 150. That's looking better. It's a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more colorful. Another way to get that in, this little side panel here, is just to right click on the picture and go to Format Picture. And that'll also pull up this panel, but we'll go through all these things and what they mean. Let me just finish going through this top panel first with you guys. So from the color option, we have the saturation that we've seen. So I'll just reset that to 100% saturation. The color tone is going to change it from cool to warm, which you can see. It's just adjusting the temperature of the image. So from bluer to more red. And then you've got these recolor options. Now this recolor, I find to be fairly useful in certain situations if I want to draw attention to something. So for example, I might gray out a picture when it's not selected, and when people select it, it goes full color again. And that's something that I might use this color mode to do, adjusting these colors. So like, for example, I might have this image, let's say if it was small and you have a bunch of different images, I could actually have like, when you select it, maybe it goes full screen, but when it's not selected, it's kind of grayed out, and then you select it and it becomes color, right? And maybe it gets a bit bigger, something like that. Those are kind of effects that you can put in to bring your PowerPoints to life. And we'll go through that again later when we get into interactive PowerPoints and animations. But yeah, so there's a little trick in terms of just adjusting the color using this thing. Other than that, it's, if you quickly want to set it as a background and you don't want to have to worry about adding a transparency on top of the image, that would be a quick way to just either, make it grayscale, super dark, or put a kind of a light film over it. And then you've got these color ones, and I don't typically use the color ones, but there might be a reason for it. All right. The other thing is corrections, and from corrections you can adjust the sharpness, and so you can kind of basically blur out the image, which is another very useful feature for making background images. And these can be combined together. So for example, you could blur it out. So if I click on soften, this will blur out this image, and I could then apply this filter to it. So now I've got this grayed out, blurred background image, and all done within PowerPoint very easily. Another thing you can do is adjust the brightness and contrast. So brightness and contrast gives you this grid like so, and it's going to start you in the middle at 0% brightness and 0% contrast. That's basically normal. That's the default that the picture has. Moving up straight from there is just decreasing your contrast, and moving down is increasing your contrast. And so contrast will basically increase the difference between your lights and your darks. And then moving left will decrease the brightness, so making the image darker, and moving right will make the image brighter. And so you can play around with this to find, like, that's maximum contrast, maximum brightness. This is minimum contrast, minimum brightness, so it makes a flatter image. And you can kind of mess around with this to find what you want. These do go up in 20% increments, which I find to be a bit big. So again, just as before, you can click on picture correction options, and it will bring you right to there where you can see the brightness and contrast. And so we've gone through most of the things in this top menu that are useful. The artistic effects, again, as I mentioned, we're not going to go through all of that. You've got your change picture button right here, which will allow you to change the picture if you decide that you want something else. But you can also do that by right-clicking and change picture. And then reset picture will get rid of any of those artistic effects, get rid of any of your color adjustments, and just put it back to default. And so you can reset the picture, but you can also reset picture and size. And so then the size will also get rid of any crop that you've put in. So that crop that I put in to make it full screen is now gone. So I'm going to undo that because I want to keep it full screen for now. And now we'll get into this area over here and go through a little bit more detail of what these things are. So first of all, let's start with the format picture. So how to get this thing open again, just as a reminder, right click, format picture. Now this comes open. Let's start with this fill and line. Okay. So first of all, you've got drop down arrows. So we're going to go ahead and open those all up, and I'll just briefly explain what these things are. So fill is the background fill of this picture. Now, right now it's set to no fill, which in 90% of the cases, that's what you're going to use. But let's go ahead and set it to solid fill and see what happens. So I'm going to set it to some really easy to identify color so that we can see where it is. So it's this purple color. So, all right, what have I just done? Well, where's that purple color? I don't see it anywhere. Okay, well, watch this. If I go to crop and I shrink this image down so that the image is now this big, but the actual source image doesn't fill up that space, this is where we see that background color. So that is where that background color is coming in. It's determined from here. If you set no fill, it will be transparent and it will just pull whatever the background image of your slide is. If you set it to a solid color, you can change what that color is over here. Not only can you change that color, but you can change the transparency of that color. Now, please note that this transparency slider does not change the transparency of this image. It only changes the transparency of the background color of the image. All right, so just bear that in mind. I'll teach you guys how to make semi-transparent images in a later video. All right, so gradient fill is just creates a gradient, and I'm not going to go through this again because I don't use gradients, and also I don't recommend using gradients in most cases. And it's the same function as it would be to create a gradient within a shape or within the background or anything. So it's just this same template. So I'm not going to go through gradient. Picture or texture fill is actually sometimes can be useful. So basically it will let you, instead of having a background color, it'll let you have a image that it uses as its background. And so you can insert your own image as the background, or you can use one of these set textures. And this is not something I use often, but from time to time, there are some uses for it. This is just about tiling your image as a texture. So if you have a smaller image like that, it'll just kind of repeat it forever as a background image. And sometimes there's use for that, but we're not going to get into that because it's very rare. And then we've got pattern fill, which again is just a bunch of patterns. And not something that I ever use. Slide background fill will pull the background from whatever the slide is. So in general, you're going to leave this on no fill. Occasionally, you might need it on solid fill. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and crop and put this back to fill so that it gets rid of that empty space. And the next thing is line. So let's go look at what line does. So this one you guys should be familiar with. This is essentially the outline of the image. Very easy to understand. So let's go ahead and set it to this, let's put it at orange. And here's where you adjust the size of this image, of this line. And so it's measured in points. And as you can see, as I make it bigger, we're getting this thicker and thicker border around the image. Now something to note about the line that is very annoying in PowerPoint that I haven't for the life of me figured out a good workaround. There is no control over where this line appears. And by where it appears, I mean in relation to the actual edge of the picture, right? So if you imagine the picture's edge being a corner, so let me just visualize this for you. All right, here we've got this corner, right? The corner of this blue box. A line appearing on top of that, that corner. Let me make this orange so it stands out. Okay. I'll put both. So imagine that this blue box is a photograph, and imagine that this orange line is a line that we're putting around the photograph. It has three options in terms of where it can go. It can go outside the image like this, right? So now it's outside the image. And we can, let's just make a second one so we can make a corner here. I'm going to hold shift so it rotates at 90 degrees. There we go. So that would be essentially having your corner aligned to the outside of your image. Another thing it could do is it could align to the edge. Like essentially it could snap to the middle of your image, right? And you could have the same thing on this side and then they line up like so, right? That's another way it could work. Or the final way it could work is it would be on the inside of your image, kind of like covering up more of your image. So those are the three options in terms of how an outline could work. And in PowerPoint, it seems to always default to this option, and I haven't found a way to change that. It's very likely that there is a way to do it, and I'm just not familiar with it. So if any of you guys know how to do that, like, good on you. The biggest frustration is that when I then select this image, this border line, this edge, doesn't accurately represent the edge of that outline. It only represents the edge of the image, and the outline stretches over that further. So to demonstrate that, I'm just going to zoom in on this vulture image, and you can see my line, this place where I'm selecting, looks like it's inside the border of this orange outline. However, if I was to snap this, right? If I snap it to the edge of the screen and I snap it to the top of the screen and then I drag this down to go full screen, you'll notice that around on all sides, that orange line is actually overlapping the edge of the slide. And so the edge of the slide, now when I go full screen, it's going to appear, it's almost not even visible. It's like very, very narrow and it's off the edge of the slide. And that to me is the biggest frustration of using the outline function, is like you always feel like you have to make these images smaller so that the outline shows up where you want it to show up. So if I was to do something like that, let's see if we can see the line now. Yeah, so now but it's all a mess. So this is not something that I ever recommend doing for full screen images. But it is there as an option. So on the note of that line, let's go back to that outline option. So I'm just going to select any one. There's a few things that you should consider. The first is that the line can be made to be transparent. So let's say we add a 6-point line around this. I'm just going to type that in. There we go. So the line can be adjusted in transparency, but again, not the image, just the line. And then this is the compound type. So what does the line look like? Again, there's very few situations in which I wouldn't just use a solid line, because this is basically adding unnecessary complexity to my design. And it's just like more clutter in the design. So I'm going to leave this on solid for now. Another thing you can do is change the actual style of the line. Now this could sometimes be useful. In fact, I've used this on maps to like designate an area where we're going to go. I've used this kind of outline, or like a route, a line. You can make it look like you're traveling on a road or something. So you got a bunch of different dash types that you can experiment with. And of course you can also adjust the size of that. And so adjusting the size will adjust kind of how it appears. The join type is going to be beveled, mitered, or round. And so this miter, if you'll see here where it joins, these two corners are joining, it creates a sharp edge right there. And so if I was to change that to bevel, it creates a beveled edge. You see that little cut right there? I'm going to zoom in so you can see this even easier. It creates a little cut in the line. And finally, if I click round, guess what it does? It makes a rounded edge. So you've got basically flat, round, beveled, or mitered, and those basically just determine how lines make corners. Do they make them with beveled edges? Do they make them with cornered edges, or what? So I tend to prefer round or mitered. I don't typically use the beveled one. Now, this is an outline, so there's a few options here that are grayed out because this isn't a line, but we also have the options to do arrows, and I'll show you that when we get into shapes. This is not the thing on shapes yet. All right, so we finished with this first tab. Let's go through the next tab. What can we do in here? Now, I'm not going to go through this very much because all of this is controlled from the shape effects. And so this is the fine-tune details area, but the more easy way to do this, and this is the way I would recommend, is to come up, select your image, come up to format, and then down here, don't use these picture style thing, but right here you have picture effects. And so you've got the same options over here. So shadow, reflection, glow, soft edge, bevel, 3D rotation, and then a couple presets as well. And now you can just hover over these to kind of get a good look at what they will do to your picture. And some of these are really cool, and you can really experiment with this and kind of find a style and or a look for your document. You can do, look at this, like cool 3D stuff that you can do. Don't go overboard with it, and once you pick something, kind of stick with it. But you can do some pretty cool effects here. The most common one is using one of these drop shadows. And I'll show you that, as you can see, it says offset bottom right on that drop shadow. So this drop shadow is going down and to the right over here, right? And so then this would be down and center, down and left, center and left, center, center. So center, center would be basically a drop shadow all the way around it, and then so on. And so you can see as I move around this thing, the drop shadow is moving, you know, in the same way around the image. Guys, whatever one you do, please try to stick with that for your whole design, because it looks really weird when on one page you've got different images, and sometimes the shadow is coming like this, and sometimes the shadow is coming like this, and sometimes the shadow's like this, and so it looks really unprofessional. So just keep in mind that, like, on a single slide, your images should have the same effect. And if they have different effects, be careful, because you can make it look a bit weird. That's all the outer shadow. The inner shadow is pretty cool. This can make it look like it's cut out of a picture or an old Polaroid film thing. I use this one to give my images, make it look like they're inside a picture frame, right? You have this little shadow inside the image as well. And then perspective is also pretty cool. You can have it look like it's standing up, and you can have a shadow reaching out behind it. This one will even do a floating shadow, like under the image, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, if you click Shadow Options, it's going to bring you here, and you'll have all of your additional options to control in much more detail for each one of these effects over here. And so, for example, if I was to set the shadow, I select my preset. Let's say I select this one, the shadow one, but it's like too high. So you just adjust the distance, right? You can adjust the transparency of your shadow here, the size of your shadow. So it's all customizable. So in this case, let's do something like this. Distance is going to be there. And you can adjust the blur, and you can mess with it until you get it the way you like. And once you get it the way you like, you try to keep it like that. All right, so normally I don't actually create these custom shadows, because it's kind of annoying to then reapply them over and over again. But if I did want to reapply it, I would just come to this guy with my new shadow and go to Home Page and go to Format Painter. And I'm literally just going to paint that shadow over to the next picture. And I can do this as much as I want across the entire slide. So that's how you would get your custom shadow applied to more than one little monkey here. To remove it, you just come to your shape effects, come to your shadow, no shadow. Now the shadow's gone. All right, so that's adding that effect. Let's right click, open format picture again. Let's look at a few other things. So that we finished. Let's go over to here. This is an important one, size and position. Text box we're not going to worry about too much. So for size, this is where you have your height and your width. You can also rotate it in here and adjust it perfectly. You can lock the aspect ratio of the picture, which is useful. And you can reset it if you want to get it back to the normal. The position is on the page where it is currently positioned. So you can see as I'm moving this around, those numbers are changing. As I'm changing the size, these numbers are changing. And you can set them or click on them or set it to a particular size that you want it to be. If your image is set to a square aspect ratio, they will change together. However, if my image is set to not a square aspect ratio, let's say it's set to anything else, now if I change the size, which I can do again from here or from here, it's available right there, in newer versions of PowerPoint, it will actually maintain that same aspect ratio. However, just be careful, because you might find that your image is not locked. The aspect ratio is not locked. That is a common way in which you end up with a situation like this, where you start changing the size and the width is not changing, and now it's all stretched out and you've lost your original picture's aspect ratio. So again, I'm going to set this to a 1-to-1 aspect ratio. I'm going to fill that image. I'm going to set the size to this one. So what do I have? 1.88. So I just copy that, click on this one, come up to the size, and paste. Oops. I have to make sure that this is set to a 1-by-1 aspect ratio. And then I should be able to paste like that. Oh, but you see, because my locked aspect ratio wasn't locked, so it didn't copy to the other one. So now if I was to set 1.88, the other one will shrink. There you go. So I have to unlock the aspect ratio to do that. And now I can lock the aspect ratio. Now it's locked at that 1:1 again. There we go. So yeah, that's how you adjust the size, the position. I think we're all good in there. And let's go to the last bit. And this is picture corrections again, as well as the crop. And so this is, all of this stuff is the fine tuning of the information that you see up here in the top right. All right. We're almost done with image manipulation. So just hang on with me a few more minutes. There's a few other things that we need to do with a different type of image. And I want to show you a few tricks as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a trick for quickly adding public domain images. And so we're going to go over to Insert and Get Add-ons. And I want you guys to search for something called pixels. And I want you guys to click Add. And once you click Add, it'll just accept it. And it'll add a little thing like this called Open Pixels. Once you do this, directly from PowerPoint, you will be able to open this little side panel. And if you're connected to the internet, you'll be able to search for anything you want. And all of these images are public domain, which means you don't need to credit the author. You don't need to worry about licensing. You can use them however you want. So this is a great way to find useful images, usually pretty high quality images, directly from online. And you just click it and it enters your PowerPoint immediately. So this is a great way to quickly add nice looking stock images to your PowerPoint. And, you know, they won't have everything, but they do have a lot. So feel free to explore and see what they have. And the greatest thing about this is that you don't need to go online, download an image, find the file, upload it in, waste space on your hard drive. It just brings you a good quality version of that image directly into your PowerPoint. And that's going to be sufficient in 99% of your cases. While we're here, I'm just going to quickly use that nice color to show you how easy it would be to do a lovely looking, oops, that's the outline, no outline, lovely looking slide using that image and pulling a nice color from that image. I'm just going to start typing. And we're going to right click, format shape, text options. We're going to align it to the top. And we'll go home and align this left. And let's adjust the margins to 5 and 5. Good. Let's make this bigger. And let's change the font. And watch this. We're even going to make some, oops. Texty. All right, we'll make that a different font, maybe a smaller one. That looks nice. Right. And let's change the color of this to that nice rich orange in there. Beautiful. And there we have a very simple style that is kind of designed to match the image that it was pulled from. So yeah, that's how easy it would be to kind of get a image in and then quickly throw together a slide that kind of matches the color tone of that image. Right. So that's how you add some free stock images. That's a really useful little trick. And then the last little trick I wanted to show you guys is about removing the backgrounds of images. And there's two ways to do this. And so I'm going to show you the old way first, because this one will be more common on older laptops that have older versions of PowerPoint. And then I'll show you the new way. And the new way is pretty cool. So first I'll show you the old way. And so I'm just going to go ahead and insert an image, but I need to find a very particular type of image. Okay, so we've got this image in here, and I'm going to show you two interesting tricks that we can do with this image. If you have an image that has a nice solid white background, or a white area in something, in some area, you can actually use this to set a transparent color. And so the way you would do that is you'd come up here to color and go set transparent color, and then you'll see that there's this mouse cursor has changed. And so now I'm going to click here, and theoretically that white background on all three of these devices should now not be a white background. And so we can test this. I'm going to cut this image and I'm going to paste it here, and ta-da, there you go. We've actually removed the background of this picture by selecting the white and telling it, hey, this white stuff, we don't need that. That's not useful. And it doesn't have to be white. It's just easier when it's white. So let's try that method on this picture here. So I'm going to tell it to set this blue as the transparent color. So let's go color, set transparent color, and I'm going to select this blue. Well, not bad. It got most of it. There's a little bit down here that it didn't do well, and that's okay because I can actually just crop out that section like that. You'll notice there's a little bit of a blue outline around the bird, but that shouldn't be noticeable on the right colored background. So there we go. So that's how fast it could be to make a kind of pretty cool looking cutout version of your animal. Of course, on a picture like this, that would be extraordinarily difficult, right? Because there's no good, right? If we do set transparent color and we click on this background, it's just going to be a mess. You see what I mean? So having it be on a solid background makes it very easy for that trick to work. And this is a very nice way of creating some pretty cool looking effects and some really nice style to your document or your presentation that you're working on. I can even go ahead and add a shadow to this, which will now appear right around that little pop-up bird. So it makes it look almost like he's popping out of the picture, which is pretty cool. Or I can even do that and add, look at that. How cool is that? So like just using a photograph, you know, no actual Photoshop required. I now have a slide that looks like this. You know, that's pretty cool that you can do all of this within PowerPoint within seconds. So yeah, there you go. I mean, that's how easy it would be. I mean, you can imagine you can put some cool information about lesser adjutants over here, and you've got this nice like cutout bird with his little shadow on the ground. Pretty cool stuff. All right, let's get the monkey back. And so now, like, how on earth would we do this monkey? Well, this monkey is probably a very bad example to test this on, but we're going to try the new method. So we're going to go up to Format, and we're going to click on Remove Background. And it's going to open this new window. All right, not bad. So it's done. This is using actually artificial intelligence and machine learning to do this estimate. And so basically, the purple stuff will be removed. And so what you can do is just click inside areas using these mark areas to keep and mark areas to remove buttons up here. So I'm going to mark areas to keep, and I'm going to select the rest of his tail. And you don't need to do it very accurately. Look at this crazy line that I've just done. You click and you let go, and it just figures out, okay, this whole tail it wanted to do. And actually, while I was doing that, it figured out that it wanted me to keep some of the head hair as well. So let's go ahead and do his hand. So I'm just going to draw like a little box like so and some squiggles, and let's see what it does. All right, pretty good. There's a little bit left of his thumb up there. Let's see if we can get that. We got it. And his foot needs a little bit more. So I'm just going to do like that and see how accurate it is. We need a little bit more of his toes. Pretty good. Pretty good. I think that's probably going to be good enough for now. And let's go. And if we wanted to mark areas to remove, let's say there was something in here that we didn't want to keep, we can kind of go in and mark those as red, and let's see what that does. There we go. So it's taken out a little bit of his fur sticking up there. Maybe we don't want this fur here. We can just draw a line like so. There we go. It slendered him up a little bit. So yeah, that's how easy it is to do. And then when we click keep changes, we've got a reasonably decent cutout of that same monkey. And again, by applying some nice little effects, so I can put this shadow around him on all sides, that maybe will blur some of that kind of nasty looking cutout job around his edge. And again, if we put this on a textured background, that can also help kind of make it look a little bit better. So for example, one thing we could do to make this image stand out a bit better, you'll look if we go full screen, it's a little bit weird. But what if we add some sort of nice texture behind it? So let's go ahead and find a paper texture. let's go ahead and find a nice little, oh, that's weird, old paper texture. Oh, what? I know they used to have that. I don't know where that went. Very strange. All right, that's this one will work. We'll use that. This is Unsplash, which is another public domain site for images. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and send that to the back, and we're going to go ahead and make that texture be full width. So I'm holding Control again to adjust the edges. I'm going to fill it like so. And then let's go to adjust the color of that picture. We'll take the temperature up a bit to match the tone, and then corrections. We'll reduce the brightness. And actually, you know what we'll do? We're going to put an overlay on top of that. So I'm just going to insert a shape, square, on top of that. No outline. So no outline. We'll go full screen. And I think we'll make it white. And then right click, format. Oops, that was the wrong one. Right click, format, shape. We'll adjust the transparency on that to about like so. Maybe we will make it a bit orangey. No, that's too orange. There we go. And now I'm going to right click, send that to the back. And then I'm going to right click the image and send that to the back. And there we go. Like within a few seconds, we now have kind of camouflaged some of this uglier cutout stuff. How do I delete this comment? There we go. And that already looks better. And that's you know, you could make a nice slide out of this somehow. So that's cutting images, removing backgrounds from images. This is a very useful trick if you want to make, like, for example, a prototype of your phone or your app that you're working on. We went through how to adjust image columns and set them as full width, how to group them, ungroup them, how to set borders, adjust the effects of the images, change the color of images. I think we've really solidly covered image manipulation within PowerPoint. I'm just trying to think if there's anything I missed before we wrap this up. Picture effects, picture layout. No, we're not going to go through that. Rotating the image. Oh, that's a useful trick, is flipping the image. If you're like, oh, I want the bird going the other direction, no problem. You can just flip. So under the rotate is the flip horizontal option, and now you've flipped your image. That's a very, very useful little trick. Sometimes if it's like, oh, I really want this bird over here, but now I only see his feet. No problem. Rotate, flip horizontally. So there we go. That's a few other tricks that I didn't cover. We've already gone through the align, the crops we did. One last thing I need to do. Cropping to different shapes. Good thing I went through this. So what about circles, rectangles, funny shapes, right? Other shapes. There's a few different ways to do that. And the first one is cropping here. So crop to shape. From here, you can change the current shape that you have your image cropped to. And so that, for example, in PowerPoint, this rounded rectangle, you can adjust the curve by moving this little orange dot. We can also, let's go back to crop to shape. So we've got all sorts of different shapes here that you can crop to and modify. This is a very useful thing, right? If you want to make adjustments, special adjustments. And again, let's say you cropped it to this shape and you want to move it, no problem. Just select crop and you can move this whole thing around. And again, your frame is still editable, right? So you can move this monkey within this frame and you can kind of come up with all sorts of cool and clever little design ideas, right, for your crop. So that's how you might set up a kind of a cooler title slide with some sort of shape, right? Now, one thing you can't do is put a shape down first and then put an image into it. So you got to first create the image and then convert its shape. And there is one last important thing that I think we can... No, I don't think we can do that. No, we can't do that with that. So yeah, you can convert it to tons of shapes, and they've got lots of different useful shapes to choose from. Using the crop function here, I can change the kind of full position of this shape. So let's say I wanted kind of a narrow thing like so. So we're going to fill that. And then I can, kind of set up some sort of cool looking title slide with multiple pictures coming in like so. If it's not enough and it's like, oh, I've got some white sticking out there, you guys already know this trick. So you just select them all, group them together, stretch it out until it covers where you want it to cover. Ungroup it and make sure they're distributed nicely. Actually, in this case, we don't want to distribute them nicely. So in this case, we're just going to select it and crop and fill again to get rid of the small stretch that we did. And there we go. So now when you look at this, you'll have something nice like that. And that can be set as 4 different images. So yeah, cropping to shape. I think that's the last thing I wanted to show you guys. If you want them to be a circle, just select this boy here. But make sure that you set the aspect ratio to 1:1. And then it becomes a circle. And now you've got your circle for your headshots or whatever. So for this monkey's CV, he can go ahead and create a little profile like that. Shrink it down holding shift, add a little shadow, and now you've got this beautiful little menu like so. All right, guys, I think that's gonna wrap it up. I think we've been doing this probably almost an hour, and it's time to wrap up our image manipulation course. Hope you guys learned something useful in here. Hope you guys got inspired to mess around with PowerPoint's imaging features. A lot of this stuff you can do straight within PowerPoint. You don't need Photoshop to make something look good. All right, so hope you guys learned something and had fun. Catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.